Alrighty, SY Sports back with another college football video. On to the SEC schedule ratings. On to the last and final schedule ratings. Finally. So I'm just going to list off from toughest to weakest schedules throughout the SEC. Now the ratings will be an average higher because the SEC is just more talented. So without further ado, let's get into it. Coming in at number one with the toughest schedule in the SEC is Vanderbilt, with a rating of 28.68. Now, this was unfortunate to see because their talent rating shot way up after this season, and then just to have this brutal schedule. They had a bad draw, let's say, from the West, and yeah, let's get into it. So you start off on the road at Hawaii. Now, I'm not saying Hawaii is anything special, but it's on the road. You get Elon at home. You get Wake Forest at home, and I believe Sam Hartman will probably not be in that game, unfortunately, after the bad news yesterday. So you get a Sam Hartman-less Wake Forest team. You go to Northern Illinois, who just won the MAC. Now, I know they were very lucky last year, but still, you still have to go on the road. Then you draw Alabama, but you have to go to Bama. Then you get Ole Miss, but it's at home. It's at home. Then you have to go to Georgia, to Missouri, you get South Carolina at home, you go to Kentucky, you get Florida and Tennessee at home. So at Hawaii, at Northern Illinois, at Bama, at Georgia. Missouri being the least talented team, but you still have to go to their place, and then you go to Kentucky. Coming in at number 2, Mississippi State with the rating of 28.13. Now they start off the season home against Memphis, but they lost to Memphis last year. You go to Arizona week 2 in the desert. That's tough. Then you go to LSU week 3. So the first 3 games are actually not that easy. You get Bowling Green at home, fine. You get Texas A&M, but it's at home. Arkansas is home. You have to go to Kentucky from the east. You have to go to Bama. You get Auburn at home. You get Georgia from the east, but it's at home. You get ETSU. I think it's Eastern Tennessee State. It's at home, and then you go to Ole Miss. So Memphis, at Arizona, at LSU, Texas A&M, but it's at home. Arkansas, depending on who they are, at home. You have to go to Kentucky from the east. You have to go to Bama. Luckily, you get Auburn at home. You do draw Georgia at Ole Miss. That's just a brutal schedule, which is unfortunate, but Mike Leach under year 3 usually surprises a lot of people, so we'll see. Coming in at number 3 is Arkansas at the rating of 27.52. Now remember, anything above 27 tends to be a little harder. Anything below 25 tends to be a little easier. Arkansas starts the season home against Cincinnati. Now Cincinnati is still going to be very talented, but they did lose everybody that was very good last year. So I wouldn't be shocked at this. This will probably be a close game, but I wouldn't be shocked if Arkansas blows out Cincinnati with everything new in Cincy. You draw South Carolina at home week 2. You get Missouri State. You get your neutral rivalry game against Texas A&M. You get Bama at home. You go to Mississippi State. In the middle of the schedule, you do go to BYU. That's brutal. And then after that, you go to Auburn. You get Liberty at home. Now, there probably won't be anything special without Malik Willis. You get LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and then you go to Missouri to end the season. Coming in at number 4, Florida with a rating of 27.51, so literally the same strength of schedule as Arkansas. Week 1 is Utah at home. Now, Utah is a favorite, but I could see Florida winning this game pretty easily with it being in the swamp. You get Kentucky at home week 2, South Florida at home. You do go to Tennessee this year. You get Eastern Washington at home. You get Missouri at home, LSU at home. Get your neutral rivalry game against Georgia and Jacksonville. But you do have to go to Texas A&M this year. You get South Carolina at home, and then you end the season at Vandy at Florida State. So really, you get a lot of good home games this year from your own division. And then you do have to play Utah, but it's at home. Now you do have to go to Texas A&M and to Florida State this year, and depending if Vandy is anything like their talent rating says, that could possibly be a game to watch. Coming in at number 5 is your defending champs, Georgia, with the rating of 26.53. Now they get their, quote, neutral site game against Oregon to start the season, but it's in Atlanta, I believe, so that's just a home game. You get Samford at home. You go to South Carolina this year. You get Kent State at home. You go to Missouri. You draw Auburn. Oh, wait, you don't draw Auburn. You play Auburn every year. Duh. Rivalry game. You get Auburn at home this year. You get Vandy at home this year. You get your neutral site game against Florida. You get Tennessee at home. You do have to go to Mississippi State at the end of the season. Now, everyone's calling that an upset this year, but when everybody starts calling it an upset, that's when you know it probably won't happen. And then after that, you go to Kentucky, and then you get Georgia Tech at home. So Oregon, maybe start the season, maybe, but new coaching there. Former assistant under Kirby, maybe. You do go to South Carolina. You go to Missouri. Obviously, your Auburn and Florida games. You get Tennessee at home, depending on what they become. At Mississippi State is probably your toughest game this year. And then you could say at Kentucky just because it's right after Mississippi State. Coming in at number 6 is Auburn, the rating of 26.13. Start the season, home against Mercer, home against San Jose State. Not too worried about those. You do get Penn State at home. Now, that game's very interesting to me because it all just depends on what Auburn is and what Penn State is. You get Missouri at home, so your first... Oh, wait, and then you get LSU at home, so your first 5 games are all at home. That's nice. But then your first road game is at Georgia and then at Ole Miss back-to-back. You get Arkansas at home. You go to Mississippi State, Texas A&M at home. Then your week game of it's not week, but it's right before the rivalry weekend, Western Kentucky. And then you go to Bama this year, which they've never been good at. So Penn State is at home. LSU is at home. At Georgia, at Ole Miss back to back. That's tough. You get Arkansas at home. You do have to go to Mississippi State. Texas A&M is at home, and then I guess at Bama. So at Bama, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, and possibly at Mississippi State. So it's like 50-50. At Georgia, at Alabama is definitely going to be tough. At Ole Miss, at Mississippi State, depending on what they become this year, because it's towards the later half of the schedule. Coming in at number 7 is LSU with the rating of 25.60. LSU gets their neutral site game against Florida State, but it's in Louisiana, so that's basically a home game. Then you get Southern at home, you get Mississippi State at home, New Mexico at home. Then your first official road game is at Auburn. Then you get Tennessee at home from the East. Then you have to go to Florida in your rivalry game right after that. Get Ole Miss and Bama at home back-to-back. You go to Arkansas this year, you get UAB at home, and then you go to Texas A&M this year. So really the only scary stuff is obviously Bama at home. You do have to go to Florida depending if Billy Napier is going to be good at coaching and Anthony Richardson steps up. You go to Auburn depending on what they are. Not too worried about Florida State, but it's still branding-wise. To Arkansas later in the season, and then to Texas A&M. At Texas A&M is probably your toughest game. Coming in at number 8 is Texas A&M. It's a rating of 25.51, so similar to LSU. Get Sam Houston, App State at home. You do draw Miami at home. That's one of my favorite games to watch this year. Your neutral site game against Arkansas. Your first official road game is at Mississippi State, and then at Bama, at South Carolina. 3 road games in a row. That's brutal. You get Ole Miss and Florida. You draw Florida. You get them both at home. You go to Auburn. You get UMass at home, and then LSU's at home. So maybe Miami. At Mississippi State, at Bama, at South Carolina is a very tough stretch. And then on the road at Auburn. And then depending on what LSU is, you get them at home. Coming in at number 9 is Tennessee, the rating of 25.39. You get Ball State at home, but then you go to Pitt week 2. That's going to be interesting. You get Akron at home. You get Florida at home. You do draw LSU on the road. So you get LSU and Bama back-to-back. LSU on the road, Bama at home. You get UT Martin at home. Kentucky's at home. You do have to go to Georgia this year. You get Missouri at home. You go to South Carolina, to Vandy at the end of the season. So tough stretch of at Alabama or at LSU and Alabama at home. Week 2 at Pitt. Maybe Florida at home. Maybe Kentucky at home. You have to go to Georgia, and then the end of the season at South Carolina and at Vandy could be kind of tricky. Number 10, South Carolina with the rating of 25.37. Start the season home against Georgia State. Then you go to Arkansas week 2, and then you get Georgia week 3. So that's tough 2 games. You get Charlotte at home week 4, South Carolina State, then at Kentucky. You draw Texas A&M, but it's at home. You get Missouri at home. Then you go back-to-back of at Vandy, at Florida. Then you get Tennessee at home. Then you go to Clemson. So you get 3 road games in your final 4 games. You draw Texas A&M. That's tough. And then week 2 and 3 at Arkansas, at Georgia. Number 11, Ole Miss with the rating of 25.05. You start the season home against Troy, home against Central Arkansas. You go to Georgia Tech. No, Georgia Tech's nothing special, but it's still a road game. And then you get Tulsa at home. You get Kentucky at home. You go to Vandy from the East this year. You get Auburn at home. You go to LSU, to A&M back-to-back. You get Bama at home. And then at Arkansas and Mississippi State at home. So the back half of the schedule is pretty rough with at LSU, at Texas A&M, home against Bama, at Arkansas, home against Mississippi State. Coming in at number 12, it's Alabama, the rating of 24.97. So basically the reason why they're here is because they don't have to play themselves. But anyways, they get Utah State at home. They do have to go to Texas, depending on what Texas is. Very talented, but can never perform right. You get ULM at home. You get Vandy from the East at home. You go to Arkansas. You get Texas A&M at home, at Tennessee. Mississippi State's at home, at LSU, at Ole Miss back-to-back, Austin, PA, and then Auburn at home. So maybe at Texas. I know everyone's high in Tennessee, but I just don't see that because they haven't been close other than like one time against Saban. At Arkansas, but back-to-back at LSU, at Ole Miss could be kind of tricky for the Tide this year. Coming in at number 13 is Missouri, the rating of 24.43. This is a good rating for them to have with them being the least talented team in the SEC. So I'd expect Missouri to play better than what their talent rating says just from looking at the schedule rating. So you get Louisiana Tech at home. You have to go to Kansas State week 2. That'll be tough. Abilene Christian week 3 at Auburn. You get Georgia at home, at Florida. You get Vandy at home, at South Carolina. You get Kentucky at home, and then at Tennessee. So a lot of home away, home away, home away. That could get kind of tricky. New Mexico State at home, and then Arkansas at home. So you go to Auburn from the West. You get Arkansas at home from the West. You have to go to Florida, at Tennessee, at South Carolina, at Kansas State. So nothing too intimidating for Missouri road game-wise other than maybe Kansas State and Florida and Auburn. All right, coming in with the easiest schedule in the SEC is Kentucky with the rating of 24.39. You get Miami of Ohio at home, at Florida. You get Youngstown State at home and Northern Illinois at home. So their typical max schedule for non-con. You do draw Ole Miss on the road. You get South Carolina at home. You do draw Mississippi State, but it's at home. You do have to go to Tennessee this year and Missouri back-to-back. You get Vandy at home. Luckily, you get Georgia at home late in the season, and you get Louisville at home this year. So at Florida, at Ole Miss, you get Mississippi State at home, at Tennessee, at Missouri back-to-back. Georgia's Georgia, but it's at home, and then your rivalry game against Louisville's home. So nothing too intimidating for their schedule this year. All right, so that's my SEC schedule ratings for the 2022 season. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya.